Boris Johnson Part 2. British leader and Prime Minister of the United Kingdom during COVID. This man had caused quite a bit of controversy, and this is part 2 of the previous video being on his car crash of an interview talking about Brexit. This video is going to concentrate on his interpretations of events for COVID.
And you've just made several false ones just now.
And just wait to the end, because you're going to hear him make a full-blown narcissistic response to his actions at Partygate.
Let's talk about COVID. In the early days of COVID, January, February 2020, you didn't attend 5 Cobra meetings.
Yes, but Cobra meetings, normally speaking, are just government meetings that take place about the issue, any issue of the hour.
Right off the bat, he's going for the lie. They're to coordinate the actions of government bodies in response to national or regional crises. And the fact that he didn't attend those meetings is pretty damn serious, because it means that others aren't taking it as seriously.
It was a new disease. People were not sure which way it would go.
They did in Hong Kong. In China, they were already shutting down schools. And the reason I know that is because I phoned them offering consultation advice for online education. I was so shocked that all the British schools in Hong Kong had shut that I actually contacted Gavin Williamson's office. I have the letter to prove it. And warned them of what was happening over there. And of course, they paid no attention.
Do you think people would be alive today if you'd acted quicker?
I can't know that.
Yes, we can know that because we have multiple scientists who verify that they warned him of this, and now he's denying it.
Yes, we should have gone into lockdown earlier. I wish we had gone into lockdown earlier. I think that has, cost a lot of lives, unfortunately.
The epidemic was doubling every 3 to 4 days before lockdown interventions were introduced. So had we introduced lockdown measures a week earlier, we would have reduced the final death toll by at least a half. So whilst I think the measures, given what we know about this virus then, in terms of its transmission and its lethality, were warranted, I wouldn't second guess them at this point. Certainly, had we introduced them earlier, we would have seen many fewer deaths.
What we've learned in Ebola outbreaks is you need to react quickly. You need to go after the virus. You need to stop the chains of transmission. You need to engage with communities very deeply. Community acceptance is hugely important. You need to be coordinated. You need to be coherent. You need to look at the other sectoral impacts, the schools and security and economic. So it's essentially many of those same lessons. But the lessons I've learned after so many Ebola outbreaks in my career are: be fast, have no regrets. You must be the first mover. The virus will always get you if you don't move quickly.
But what I can tell you is that we had a series of ever-intensifying steps leading up to the March 23rd of 2020 lockdown.
Did we? Anyone remember this?
I'm shaking hands continuously. I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody. You'll be pleased to know, and I continue to shake hands. And I think it's very important that people obviously can make up their own minds. I think Hi, folks. I want to bring you up to speed with something that's happening today, which is that I've developed mild symptoms of the coronavirus.
In fact, when he's saying there was a step-by-step plan, there was no plan.
At this point, the second most powerful official in the country, Helen McNamara, is the Deputy Cabinet Secretary. She walked into the office while we're looking at this whiteboard. She says, "I've just been talking to the official, Mark Sweeney, who is in charge of coordinating with the Department for Health. He said, quote, I've been told for years that there is a whole plan for this. There is no plan. We're in huge trouble. I've come through here to Helen McNamara said, I've come through here to the Prime Minister's office to tell you all, quote, I think we are absolutely fucked. I think this country's heading for a disaster. I think we're going to kill thousands of people. As soon as I've been told this, I've come through to see you. It seems from the conversation that you're having that that's correct. And I said, I think you're right. I think it is a disaster.
Now, there is plenty of evidence. For example, a third of children in deprived areas had no access to a laptop, and despite COVID lasting several years, the government never supplied all children with laptops because there was no plan. And those ever-intensifying steps also included sports fixtures.
Liam Thorpe from the Liverpool Echo. On the 11th of March, Liverpool hosted a Champions League match with Atletico Madrid in which 3,000 football supporters from Madrid travelled across several major international transport hubs, despite there being a major outbreak of coronavirus in Madrid at the time that had left many people dead. On the same day, the Deputy CMO, Jenny Harris, said that the advice was that large events like this would not have a big impact on the transmission of the virus. And obviously, Cheltenham Festival went ahead as well. We've since in Liverpool seen a real surge in deaths. We have 250 people died in hospital, many more in the community. And the Madrid mayor has now come out and said that hosting that specific football match at that time was a real mistake. I was just wondering if, considering the advice then changed and mass gatherings were then banned, if the government is now prepared to accept that that was a mistake and that match and other events around the time should never have gone ahead.
No, I echo what Angela said. At every stage in this crisis, we have been guided by the scientific advice and have been making the right decisions at the right time.
Those ever-intensifying steps included leaving the borders open, which allowed 20 million people into the UK.
Perhaps has literally done the opposite of the world as Transport Secretary. He has done nothing. I would ask him what on earth he's been doing for the last 9 months. No airport testing, screening or measures since the pandemic began. None. No temperature checks, no health assessments, no flight restrictions throughout this entire pandemic. No measures that have air travel actually acknowledged we're in a pandemic. The lack of measures have contributed to the worst death toll in Europe, and he detailed what every other country has been doing. So I put it to you, what have you done?
Yeah, I don't agree with that, Piers, as you won't be surprised to hear.
We went through, in the first phase of this, an extraordinary period where minister after minister appeared on this programme and tried to justify the fact that we didn't make any attempt to close the border or to test people or anything in that first phase whatsoever. In fact, we let 20 million people fly in, it is estimated, many from corona-ravaged countries like Italy, like New York in America, from China and so on, without any testing at all. I think we tested 240 odd people. This was clearly, looking back, you must acknowledge, utter lunacy, wasn't it?
So right at the beginning, I spoke to the chief medical officer and said, shall we shut the borders? To which he said, if you do, it will delay this whole thing by 3 to 5 days, but it's fundamentally already here.
I even wonder if that intensifying of steps includes getting everyone infected with the disease because they can't be bothered to put in border controls.
The policy of herd immunity, which most scientists thought was nuts. It now turns out it was nuts. It's also true, because we know this from Patrick Vallance, that we were pursuing a policy of herd immunity right to the point the modelers came back and said it would cost 500,000 lives, at which point there was a screeching U-turn. That was another one of the terrible mistakes that we made in the early stages of this pandemic.
I think it is also the case that it's important that you should clarify that the UK government was never also pursuing a policy of herd immunity.
Well, Patrick Vallance said actually on Radio 4, on record, on tape, that that's exactly what we were doing. And so when you guys say we weren't doing it, why did no one tell the chief scientific advisor? Because he was under the impression that's exactly what we were doing.
Advisors advise, ministers decide. That was
You
never
were
the policy
following the
that we were
science at
following.
the time. Do you remember? You told us every single day we are following the science, not guided by, not listening and making our own decisions. We're doing what the scientists tell us. Your chief scientific advisor, on I think it was March the 16th, on Radio 4, around that week, he said quite unequivocally that we were following herd immunity.
Also, because most people, the vast majority of people, get a mild illness, to build up some degree of herd immunity as well, so that more people are immune to this disease and we reduce the transmission. At the same time, we protect those who are most vulnerable from it.
Would suppress this virus. All of the evidence from previous epidemics suggests that when you do that and then you release it, it all comes back again. So the other part of this is to make sure that we don't end up with a sudden peak again in the winter, which is even larger, which causes even more problems. So we want to suppress it, not get rid of it completely, which you can't do anyway.
Unless, of course, you're Hong Kong, China, Vietnam, Taiwan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand. You can do it then, but not in Britain.
Not suppress it so we get the second peak. And also allow enough of us who are going to get mild illness to become immune to this, to help with the sort of whole population response, which would protect everybody.
Yeah, I mean, that herd immunity I know you talked about yesterday.
He has literally described herd immunity, the process and the plan that the government's going to take.
When you were appearing with the Prime Minister, in terms of building up a herd immunity within the UK, what sort of percentage of people need to have contracted the virus?
Probably about 60% or so. And we think that this virus is likely to be one that comes back year on year, become like a seasonal virus, and communities will become immune to it. And that's going to be an important part of controlling this longer term.
60%?
60% is the sort of figure you need to get herd immunity.
I mean, even with that, even looking at the sort of the best case scenario, I know we were talking last week and you were saying, you know, half of 1% to 1% fatality in something like this. That's an awful lot of people dying in this country.
Well, I mean, of course, we do face the prospect of, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, of an increasing number of people dying. That is a real prospect. This is a nasty disease. For most people, it's a mild disease.
Essentially trying to spread this out so that it doesn't all happen at once and overwhelm the NHS, and that you can actually delay it into perhaps the summer when it's a little quieter and the ordinary flu might have died down a wee bit. Is that what you're doing?
Well, it's a very, very important question, and that's where a lot of the debate has been. And one of the theories is that, you know, perhaps you could sort of take it on the chin, take it all in one go, and allow the disease, as it were, to move through the population.
So what is essentially...
Had I actually gone for full lockdown earlier, that would have been in advance of what the scientists were actually asking us to do.
Again, not true.
When the SAGE subgroup on modelling, SPY-M, saw that the doubling time had gone down to 3 days, which was in the middle of March, that's when the advice which SAGE issued was the remainder of the measures should be introduced as soon as possible. And that advice, I think, was given on the 18th of March or the 16th of March.
And did it immediately affect the recommendations on what to do?
Well, it absolutely affected the recommendation on what to do, which was to say the remaining measures should be implemented as soon as possible, I think was the advice that was given.
It left me with an absolute horror of the disease and a deeply serious determination to make sure that we followed the scientific advice.
I think the journalist did a pretty poor job when it came to holding him to account on all these things, but he wasn't done, and he does a better job in the second part.
We need to obviously talk about Partygate.
There are exemptions for work purposes. You must not have a work Christmas lunch or party.
I've got to press this. There were stories of drunkenness, people, physical altercations.
I implicitly believe this to be a work of it.
Shall I get the karaoke machine?
So, just to confirm, someone's been dancing on my desk?
Got to those sections of the book and it seemed to me, well, in terms you basically say it wasn't a big deal, I regret apologising.
And this is where you begin to see the narcissistic trait coming through, where he is in full denial of his actions, even though, and you'll see a little bit later, he fully admits to them.
Is that really your position, that you regret apologising?
No.
That is what you say in the book.
Well, let me explain what I said, because if you look at Unleashed, as I say, there's plenty.
I've read it. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what it says. That it was basically a load of nonsense, and you regret apologising. Do you regret apologising to the Queen?
Let me give you
No,
my own.
answer that. Do you regret apologising to the Queen?
Let me give you my own view.
Well, if you answer my question, I'll let's then perhaps go on to have your view. Do you regret apologising to the Queen?
Look, I don't discuss my conversations with the Queen.
That
and
wasn't
I'm not
my question. My question was, do you regret apologising to the Queen?
Let me explain what I meant by that observation.
This may shock you, but he never admits to regretting apologising to the Queen.
The rules have only just been adjusted after the first lockdown to say that you can only meet one person outside. But this is at a time where people are not being able to go to hospital to say goodbye to their dying relatives. People are dying alone. People are not allowed to go to funerals. People are agonisingly observe the rules. You have told us that people will die if we don't observe the rules.
Yes.
And here is your private secretary writing to over 100 people, inviting them to a party in the Downing Street Garden.
Sorry, hang on a second.
People can't understand why you wouldn't be paralytically apologetic about that.
Because I was at the time. If you remember what happened.
But now you're saying, it wasn't a big deal. I shouldn't have apologised.
Well, if you look at the reason the Downing Street Garden was used was because it was thought to be a much safer environment, and we had to maintain distancing. But look,
the rules were really clear. It didn't matter if it was a work event or a personal event. You couldn't do it.
You can meet one person outside your household in an outdoor public place.
You could only meet one person outside of your household outdoors in a public place. Large gatherings were illegal.
We were in this newsroom with arrows saying walk round this way.
And so were we.
We were outside.
So were we.
Agonisingly sticking with one person.
Well,
you weren't. You were inviting 100 people to the garden. It's madness.
But that was outside. I really, really don't think that those officials thought that they were setting out to break the rules.
But they were breaking the rules.
They were the ones creating the laws, and now they're claiming ignorance. But it doesn't matter anyway, because the police will still charge you. Ignorance is not a defence.
They thought that they were doing something. They were working round the clock. And they thought they were within the framework.
But they were repeatedly found to be breaking the rules by the police.
I don't know.
We saw members of your staff laughing on a video about breaking the rules.
What's the answer?
I don't know. It wasn't a party. It was cheese and wine.
Just be clear, it's not. Is cheese and wine all right? No. It was a business meeting.
I'm joking.
It is recorded. His fictional party was a business meeting. And it was not socially distant.
And remember, he's now changed his tune because of what he said in Parliament.
I understand and share the anger up and down the country at seeing Number 10 staff seeming to make light of lockdown measures. And I can understand how infuriating it must be to think that the people who have been setting the rules have not been following the rules, Mr. Speaker, because I was also furious to see that clip.
The reason I'm pressing this is that I just know there were people watching this programme who are really upset with you, and they want to know that you understand.
Of course I understand it, and you can't say that I haven't been exposed to, over the last few years, to the full force of people's anger and indignation.
There you go, he's the victim in all of this. He's had anger thrown at him. He set a load of rules, it badly affected everyone, he broke those rules, and now he's a victim because people are angry with him. Narcissistic behaviour, and it gets worse.
I've got to press this. There were stories of drunkenness, people, physical altercations, and I'm like, I can't.
There were stories, Tom, where those stories substantiate.
Yes, by the police, you total idiot. So, of course, within all of this, he then starts going down the conspiracy route.
I can only give you my honest opinion of it all now, right?
His honest opinion. Have a listen to all of these clips.
You can meet one person outside your household in an outdoor public place.
You could only meet one person outside of your household outdoors in a public place. Large gatherings were illegal.
Now watch how he changes his story as everything begins to unravel and people find out more and more about what actually took place.
All guidance was followed completely.
And then...
I repeat, Mr. Speaker, that I have been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged that there was no party. I can tell you that I certainly broke no rules.
And of course, it gets worse.
I thought it was a work event. Nobody told me that what we were doing was, as you say, against the rules.
It's extremely unlikely he could have invited 100 people to a party in the Downing Street Garden without the assent of the Prime Minister.
To then saying this.
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise. I know that millions of people across this country have made extraordinary sacrifices over the last 18 months. I know the anguish that they have been through, unable to mourn their relatives, unable to live their lives as they want, or to do the things they love. And I know the rage they feel with me and with the government I lead when they think that in Downing Street itself, the rules are not being properly followed by the people who make the rules.
Who investigated this thing? Why don't you tell our viewers who investigated it?
I don't want to go down the avenue of Sue Gray.
And who is, just to remind our viewers who Sue Gray is.
I thought you were sorry, but in the book, you're not.
Well, I obviously bitterly regret mistakes that I made. But what I was trying to say is that by a blanket apology at the outset, I seem to inculpate everybody for every accusation. And you've just made several false ones just now.
No, he didn't. In fact, I would probably argue he was pretty light on you, because you had to worm and squirm your way out of this. And to get a confession out of you took a lot of effort over a long period of time. And eventually you did confess, and now you're retracting. Narcissists are known for utilising reactive abuse against their victim, meaning they use your reaction to the abuse they inflicted on you in an effort to make you look crazy and unstable. They then tell other people half-truths about what actually happened, leaving out the part of the non-stop abuse they've relentlessly been subjecting you to. Remember, omission of the facts is still lying. And what has he done throughout this part of the interview? What has he done during his premiership? Remember, I'm just asking questions. And then, the final piece de resistance, the icing on the cake, he then starts talking about how important he was for the Conservative Party, and only Partygate held him back.
Don't forget that we were only a couple of points behind. One poll put us 2 points behind in the polls. I had a very positive agenda, which you will discover in Unleashed. We were getting on with a lot of wonderful things.
We haven't got
and I have no. I had every hope that I would go on, and every prospect of going on to win the next election.
A full-blown narcissistic response to the damage that he did to thousands whilst he sat in his office partying, chatting, carrying on as if it was normal, because no one was on top of him to keep an eye on his behaviour and put a check on him. No one. In fact, some of the people that could have done that sat there and partied alongside. One thing I would have liked the journalist to add is, if Boris is so adamant about him being completely innocent, let's get someone to release all that CCTV footage of everything that he was doing at the time. It would resolve everything instantly. So after all of that, in the comments, can you just give me one word that describes Boris Johnson? Once again, thank you to all my Patreon YouTube subscribers. You really keep this channel going and growing. If you'd like to become one or just buy me a coffee, link is in the description. Once again, thanks for listening. Bye for now.